Welcome to Northern California Public Media coverage of the 2018 midterms. I'm NCPM News Director Steve Mencher. Perhaps you're joining us after hanging out with another media outlet this evening and watching national returns. Well, we're going to focus on the North Bay and the South Bay tonight. We call that hyper-local news. We're going to be visiting with Representative Jared Huffman, Marin Independent Journal columnist Dick Spotswood, Beatrice Camacho of the North Bay Organizing Project, Caryl Hart, former director of Sonoma County Parks, and correspondent Terry Christensen in the South Bay. Since KRCB went on the air in 1984, we've covered elections from our perch here in Rohnert Park. And with the addition of KPJK in the South Bay, we now make a commitment to bring you coverage from a wider area with insight and integrity. And by the way, we're also simulcasting on KRCB FM Radio 91 in the North Bay tonight. If you've got a question for us about the election, write to us at news@norcalpublicmedia.org or call 707-584-2000. Now, first up, Democratic Representative Jared Huffman, who has probably retaken his seat in California's 2nd District, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And by the way, for a snapshot of where key national races stand right now, visit norcalpublicmedia.org/election 2018. So, first things first, Jared, what are you hearing about your own race tonight?
Looks very good.
Okay.
Feel very honored and humbled to have a chance to serve a 4th term in the Congress for this great district.
A 4th term, wow. And tell me about the Democrats. How are the Democrats doing in terms of retaking the House?
I have been watching races very closely all night long. It looks like we're toward the high end of my expectations, so I feel very good about that. I'm going to be in the majority, which is great. I can do a lot more for my district as part of the majority. Just as important, we can begin the process of restoring checks and balances in our democracy, providing some oversight and some scrutiny and transparency on this presidency. So this was a really good day for the country and a good day for my district, too.
Well, we don't have to wait even for the Orange County returns to come in until we know that the Democrats are in ascendancy?
Yeah, it looks like we're already going to get past 218. I'd like to push that number as far past 218 as we can. So I will be watching a lot of the California races as well. A good night in California would be 3 to 4 seats flipping. A great night would be 5 to 6 seats.
All right. Now, one of the things that was a little controversial in terms of the Democrats was how excited you guys would be about impeachment when you went back. Is that the first thing you're going to do in January?
That's not the first thing on my mind or anyone else's mind, and I happen to be one who thinks Trump has committed impeachable offenses and that we should get there. What is on my mind is accountability. That's what's been missing. We've had a president for 2 years who looks out only for himself and a Congress that looks the other way. So that's going to change in early January. We are going to use the subpoena power. We're going to use oversights. We will get President Trump's tax returns, get to the bottom of these emolument clause issues, these conflicts of interest, these terrible incidents of corruption and scandal. Where that leads, I think it very well could lead 218 of my colleagues to support impeachment. But regardless, we're going to do the country a great service by providing that oversight.
Now, the House of Representatives on its own can't really do very much, can they? They need the Senate and the President to make law, right? So how is that going to work?
Well, on the oversight piece, we don't need anyone else,
right.
and that's why it's such a game changer.
Sure.
The fact that we will have those gavels, that we will set the policy agenda, that we will issue the subpoenas, get those witnesses under oath, and hold people accountable. I think that's huge, transformative potentially.
Well, but let's talk about infrastructure. Let's talk about some of the other things that maybe there's a possibility of working with the president as partners.
Yeah, we have to look for common ground where we can find it. And you're going to see Democrats do a lot more of that than what you've seen in recent Congresses. We want to do stuff. I want to do a big infrastructure play. And President Trump at one point said he wanted to do that too. So we'll have a chance to test that. Democrats will pass a big, ambitious infrastructure bill. We will do more on rural broadband deployment. We will work on clean energy. We'll finally get back in the game on climate change. One of the things I'm most pleased about tonight is that Democrats aren't just winning seats. We're winning seats with candidates who put climate change front and center in their races. They led with clean energy. And we are taking out some of the worst climate deniers in the House of Representatives. So this is a really good night for the environment, too.
Tell me about fresh leadership. I know Nancy Pelosi became an issue in the election, and there was fear that she might keep some of the House members from getting elected. When you go back, are you going to be a staunch supporter, as you have been, of Nancy Pelosi? And do you think the Democrats need some new blood?
Well, I'm going to answer yes to both of those questions, actually. I do support Nancy Pelosi. I think she's phenomenal. She has led us through the wilderness now back into the majority, and I think she'll be the next speaker. But I also want to see a new generation of leaders begin to step forward, and I want to see them poised to eventually assume the mantle of leadership in the near future. I think that's going to be happening, and I think this new crop, a very large class of new members of Congress, is going to feel that way as well.
Now, I know the Republicans, even before tonight's returns came in, were already trying to make you nervous. They were trying to say, it's great, they're thrilled that the Democrats have taken the House, because now Trump has something to run against. He can go into 2020 saying, it's those damn Democrats in the House who have been frustrating me, and you should elect me and throw the bums out. And what do you say about that?
Oh, I think they're trying to put a lot of lipstick on the pig with that. But, you know, you got to spin something after a night like this. When you look at what appears to be the popular vote margin across the country in these House races, something like 9.2%. That's one of the biggest waves we've seen. Now, we didn't match that with a huge number of seats. We may only end up in the low 30s. But that's because the Republican districts were so deeply gerrymandered. The country made a big statement tonight, and they did flip the House to Democratic control. There's really no way to sugarcoat that for Republicans, but it was a good try. Right.
Now, some of the new leaders were not able to punch through. I know Beto O'Rourke, for instance, in Texas. The governorships in Alabama and Florida. What was wrong there? What was the margin?
Nothing was wrong. I mean, each of those races that you just cited are in deeply Republican places where Democrats aren't even supposed to be competitive. So let's take Beto O'Rourke, who happens to be my dear friend and my roommate when I'm in Washington, D.C. So I'm so proud of Beto because he did something we haven't seen in Texas in a long time. He breathed life into not just Democrats, but I think a lot of people in Texas who are just fed up with all of the partisanship and the dishonesty that Ted Cruz, has perfected. So he didn't get there this time, but in some ways he did win some important things for people, for the country. People are very excited about Beto, and Texas is never going to be the same after what Beto brought in this race.
All right, does this midterm election presage any the demographic shifts, that more Latino votes, more African American votes, that the country is now in a transitional phase, and the idea that the president was running against immigrants, was running against people of color? What was the demographic opportunity for the Democrats there?
I think we at least partially realized that opportunity. We know the demographics in this country are changing. President Trump is on the wrong side of history and the wrong side of demographics when he's trying to just excite this dwindling pool of angry white men at his rallies. He, at some point, has to reach out and try to connect with the broader people of this country and build his political base. And so far, he's just shown no interest in doing that. So if he continues down that path, I think 2020 looks very bad for him if his presidency survives until 2020.
Okay. Now, I should have done my homework, but tell me a little bit about your work in Washington. What committees are you on, and what are you most excited about when you go back in January?
Yeah, so I'm the #2 Democrat on the Natural Resources Committee. I'm also on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So we talked about infrastructure. I will be in a great place to help shape a big infrastructure bill to help make sure that our priorities in the North Bay are advanced by that. Over on the natural resources side, I will be chairing a major subcommittee on water and wildlife, and there's a lot that I want to do there. Not just ending this triage against bad bills that keep coming our way in this Congress, but actually doing some productive and positive things and some bipartisan things. You know, there's all kinds of things, fisheries management, wildfire resiliency, and healthy forests, where I think there's the potential to do big bipartisan things. We just haven't had a Congress that really tries to do that in a while.
Are you going to be able to help this area continue its recovery from the fires? I know that's been a concern of yours. I've seen you out many times talking with folks, and people think, well, it was a year ago, we must have recovered by then, but we both know that that's not the case.
We do, and look, we're in it for the long haul. If there's more federal assistance needed, you can bet that Congressman Mike Thompson and I are going to not only go to the mat for our area, our region, but we're going to do it now from the position of the majority party, which is a nice thing.
Okay, are you thinking tomorrow that the Attorney General would be fired, and what would that bring to us?
Well, I don't know how smart that would be for President Trump, because I'm not sure there's anyone else he can get confirmed into that position. So it would bring chaos. He does seem to thrive on chaos, but I think his ability to play games with the independence of the Justice Department, with the independence of the special counsel, was greatly weakened by tonight's resounding Democratic victory.
All right. Now, what are these hearings going to look like? You say you're going to be able to get his tax returns. How do you do that?
Well, the Ways and Means Committee can get that on day one. The new chairman, will be Richie Neal of Massachusetts. He's already said he's going to seek the tax returns. Now, I have no doubt President Trump will try to keep hiding them, but I think the law is on our side. History and precedent are on our side. And when we see those tax returns, we'll find out, what kind of conflicts of interest are there. When we see Trump go soft on the Saudi regime, for example, in the face of this horrific murder of a Washington Post journalist, we should probably know about Trump's financial ties to Saudi wealth funds and Saudi capital. And there's all sorts of anecdotal evidence that there are such ties. We need to get to the bottom of this stuff. We shouldn't have to wonder if our president is compromised financially with Russia, with Saudi Arabia, with potentially other interests.
Well, Jared Huffman, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and congratulations on your victory, and good luck going back to Washington in January.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
All right, next up, we're in the South Bay, where correspondent Terry Christensen brings us background on some of the major races there.
Hello, I'm Terry Christensen for NorCal Public Media, and I'm the host of Valley Politics, KRCB San Jose's monthly show on local politics and public policy in the South Bay. I'm here to report on some key races in Santa Clara County and San Jose. To begin with, all the incumbent members of the South Bay delegation to Congress and the state legislature are going to win. They're all Democrats in a county where voter registration is 46% Democratic, 33% no party, and only 18% Republican. We do, however, have hot races for Santa Clara County Sheriff and for an open seat on the County Board of Supervisors. Sheriff Lori Smith, the incumbent, was first elected in 1998, becoming the first woman sheriff in California. She hasn't faced a serious challenge since then, until this year that is, when John Hirakawa, once her undersheriff, forced her into a runoff. Issues in the race include jail reform and fiscal management, but a lot of it comes down to personality and management style. The Sheriff Deputies Union endorsed Hirakawa, but the Union of Jail Guards endorsed Sheriff Smith. This could be a close contest, but the incumbent sheriff probably has the advantage as the best known name in a county where voters are very friendly to women candidates. There's also a tight race for one open seat on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. It's in the district that includes Campbell, Santa Clara, and West San Jose. If Don Rocha, currently a member of the San Jose City Council, wins, he'll join the dominant progressive majority on the board. If school trustee Susan Ellenberg wins, a new moderate majority could prevail. Either way, the board will remain liberal. It's just a question of how liberal on issues like sanctuary policy or resisting Trump through lawsuits. Ellenberg got the most votes in the primary and probably has the advantage in the runoff. Again, Santa Clara County voters tend to like women candidates, and it doesn't hurt that the district has 5,000 more female voters than male voters. On the other hand, Don Rocha has strong labor support, and that means hundreds of volunteers. In San Jose, Mayor Sam Liccardo was reelected in June with 75% of the vote. Several of his council colleagues were also easily reelected when they won over 50% of the vote in June. But 2 council seats went to runoffs, and the outcome of these races could shift the council majority in a more liberal direction or sustain the mayor's current moderate to liberal majority. In San Jose Council District 7, that's south central San Jose, incumbent Tam Nguyen faces housing advocate Maya Esparza, who came within 209 votes of defeating him in 2014. Nguyen has been an unpredictable vote on the council and has few allies and no major organizational endorsements. Esparza is supported by labor, that means lots of volunteers, and she's been endorsed by most progressive local officials. The race could affect the balance of power on the council, with Esparza joining the progressive bloc of the council or Nguyen continuing as a swing vote. But it's also a contest between San Jose's two largest ethnic populations, Vietnamese and Latino. The district is 48% Latino and 38% Asian, but Latino voter turnout is notoriously low. San Jose Council District 9, that's southwest San Jose, is an open seat because Don Rocha, the incumbent, reached his term limits. Here again, the winner could reinforce the mayor's voting bloc or could be a swing vote shifting the council a little bit to the left. Pam Foley, a school trustee, is endorsed by the Silicon Valley organization, formerly known as the Chamber of Commerce, and by the mayor, and she'd clearly be his ally. Kalen Gallagher, also a school trustee, has avoided organizational endorsements like Labor and the Chamber of Commerce, but he has the support of lots of activist Democrats, so he might incline to the council's more liberal faction. Besides the balance of power on the council, this race is of interest because Gallagher didn't seek traditional big organizational endorsements or campaign contributions, nor has he been visible much outside the district. It's a new sort of campaign for San Jose, very district and candidate focused, relying heavily on volunteers and social media. It's also of note that the Chamber of Commerce has spent upwards of $80,000 attacking Gallagher with mean and inaccurate mailings that seem as likely to me to backfire as to succeed in defeating Gallagher. So those are the key candidate races. I'll be back with a report on some crucial South Bay ballot measures shortly.
We're joined now by Dick Spotswood, columnist for the Marin Independent Journal and a longtime observer of the Bay Area political scene. He's been keeping an eye on races in Marin and Napa for us. And there's a particularly interesting race for DA in Marin, pitting Lori Frugoli against Anna Pletcher. Now, Dick, what were the candidates' pitches, and what should we be watching for in the return?
Well, first of all, Steve, it's the most exciting race because all the supervisorial races were handled in the primary. So the marquee race this time in Marin County is the race for DA. It pits two people, Lori Frugoli, who's an assistant deputy district attorney, against Anna Pletcher, who's a former attorney with the United States Department of Justice and adjunct professor at Berkeley, means part-time professor. Big money's been in the race, big interest in, I'd say in the last month, there's been tremendous interest in the race in Marin County. The sign campaign is fabulous. Pletcher is basically the progressive candidate. She's endorsed by the Marin Democratic Party, Green Party, Congressmember Lynn Woolsey, and a list of shall we say, the left of the Democratic side establishment in Marin County. Frugoli has been endorsed by every living past district attorney. She's a former Santa Rosa and Marin County Sheriff, Deputy Sheriff, so she's got a list of police chiefs, law enforcement, labor organizations, and so that's been kind of the split. Frugoli with the moderate establishment folks who kind of see the DA as a professional, trial lawyer. She's been in the office for some time, tried 100 criminal cases or so. And Pletcher, who's a Democratic progressive, who's talking about abolition of cash bail. There's been a whole issue of these rape crisis tests, big complicated issue. Progressive issues. Should they be doing more in environmental enforcement, despite the fact Marin doesn't have many environmental industries, but it's a classic political issue. So the divide is Frugoli in the center, conservative to the center, Pletcher, the libs, the left, the progressives. And that's the race. Right now, in early returns, well, I should tell you first of all what happened in the primary, because that's instructive. Frugoli got 48.6% in the primary, almost won it outright. Pletcher did okay at 30%. And a third candidate, A.J. Brady, another deputy district attorney, came in at 20%. So we have a runoff. Well, tonight, after all this stuff and after big money coming out, George Soros was a major contributor to the Pletcher campaign. Right now, with 30% of the returns right in Marin County, we have Lori Frugoli at 56%, and a Pletcher at 44%. That's early, but if I was Fergoli, I'd be a little relieved, and if I was Pletcher, I'd be a little concerned. When we get down to 50, 60%, we start to figure we have a race set, especially with this kind of 10-point spread. But it's an interesting race because it exemplifies pretty much a classic traditional divide between the moderates and the progressives.
In Napa County.
Napa County faces an unusual situation. Everybody's talking about housing. It's the favorite topic in the Bay Area. Napa County has a sales tax, a hotel tax of 12%. The question is, should it go up to 13%? And should that extra cent go to affordable housing? And they've got a complicated situation. Every county is different. You can vote for unincorporated areas, and each city has a duplicate member. So Napa could vote yes. American Canyon, St. Helena can vote no. There's no requirement to go the same way. And the question, of course, the tough part, is it 2/3? And there's an anti-tax sentiment everywhere. And every person pushing a tax, no matter how altruistic it might be, worries about, are we going to get the 2/3? And so that's the issue in Napa County. There's no early returns so far that we can tell. But I think that's what makes people who are for it. The opposition has been lukewarm at best. The establishment is certainly for it. It should pass, but the question is 2/3.
Now, 2/3, it makes it very hard for anything to happen these days.
You have a certain percentage of the voters, probably somewhere around 30 to 40%, I'd say 30 to 35%, who are going to vote no on all taxes. Depending on the county, the more conservative counties you go, the larger the numbers. San Francisco less, Sonoma a little bit more, it goes that way. Napa County is kind of a cross between the old-fashioned ways and the new people who have moved in who will be much more open to taxes. It's still a Democratic county, just like Marin and Sonoma, but will it get 2/3?
Now, there's a couple of other races that you said you were particularly interested in talking to me about today, and I'd love to hear about them.
Well, one of them really interests me. My forte over the years has been transportation issues, and I've concentrated on that just in my public life and as a columnist. Marin County has a measure called Measure AA on the ballot tonight. And Measure AA is to continue a current half-cent sales tax that they have in Marin County for mobility uses. I used to say transportation, but the bag has become so big. Mobility. Money goes to fix local streets, bicycle ways, school crossing guards, all sorts of little projects. 13% of the money goes to U.S. Highway 101, freeway improvements, usually as matching money. The current tax is a half-cent. They're simply proposing to continue it. Easy until you realize two things. One, they continue it into 2049. Now, I'm not sure any of us are going to be here in 2049, but that tax is going to be here if it passes in 2049. And the tax doesn't expire until 2025. So what the Transportation Authority of Marin says is, we're going to jump the gun, we're going to come out to you early, and we're going to, so we can have funding guaranteed. Yeah, okay. So the question, there's been opposition. The opposition was, there are no matrices. How do we know what you're going to do is going to succeed? And the answer was, the voters have now considered it. With 30% of the vote in Marin County, and the Transportation Authority of Marin should be quite pleased, it's getting a pretty persuasive 73%. 73% in today's environment of 27% voting no is pretty impressive, even at 30%. It says to me that no matter what happens, this is a winner. Proposition AA, Marin County is going to continue that sales tax until, and let me repeat, 2049. You can continue on that. The only other race I'd mention is we had a heck of a race for College Board, really with 4 people at the top.
What do the College Board folks do, please?
Well, we have a community college that's actually doing pretty well right now. The problem had been Indian Valley College in Novato, which the numbers were down, the utilization was down, and slowly but surely it's kind of come into play. And the criticism has likely gone down. The feeling was that they were the stepchild, I hate to say this for Marin, to Santa Rosa Junior College, with this wonderful reputation, and a little under the shadow of Santa Rosa JC. They're emerging, and so 2 of the college trustees were running for re-election on their record, doing very well. One, Dean Traynor, coming in at 29%. 3 get elected. That's the percentage is the key here. Diane Conti, longtime incumbent, 29%, doing very well. And the question was, who gets the 3rd spot? 2 non-incumbents. A woman named Suzanne Brown Crow, campaigning as somebody ought to come from Novato. And a guy named George Rothbard his ads say Professor George, who's operating on a student first basis. He's a teacher there. So that's the race. It's still too close to call, but Crow's ahead 19 to 15% for Professor George. Good title, by the way, when you put it on your signs.
Professor George. Vote for Professor George. Now, you said you're interested particularly in transportation, so I was wondering what you're thinking about the state Proposition 6 and the repeal of the gas tax.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of people on Prop 6.
Yeah.
And very simply, my wife said one night, she's looking at the ballot, what's Prop 6 about? And I said, well, it's repeal the gas tax. Well, she said, it doesn't say that anywhere. You have to read, it doesn't really. You have to read through it in very convoluted language. But quite simply, a yes vote repeals the gas tax hike.
Right.
No vote keeps it where it is. Governor Jerry Brown has campaigned very hard. The only thing he's campaigned on has been no on Prop 6. And
who else was against Prop 6?
well, the Republicans initially put it on the ballot as a device. They were against it as a matter of principle, but also put it on a device to get out the Republican vote, which is traditionally an anti-Republican, anti-tax vote. So the more money you have to push something like yes on Proposition 6, and you get people riled up, the easier it is for them to come out to congressional races. What happened in the latter days is that they had to yank the money because they were having so much challenge in the congressional seats that the yes on 6 money dissipated. And on the polling right now, yes on 6, well, no is winning. No is winning. The problem the Republicans had and the the yes on 6 people had was they didn't have an alternative. You don't like this plan? My rule is, okay, give me another room. I was prepared to write a column saying yes on 6. And I called the proponent of the yes on 6, and I said, so what's the alternative? Well, we're just against it. So I wrote the column, no on 6.
No on 6. And unions, of course, consider this to be a jobs bill.
It's a job creation, right. California's infrastructure is falling apart.
Yes.
Nobody disagrees with that. And the state of 40 million people, basically 40 million people, this is ridiculous. It's impinging on the economy. It's just not right. It's bad for the environment. You name it. Everybody agrees we should do something. The question is always easy. How do you pay for it? Right. Nobody wants to pay for anything. Who does? Do you? I don't. And so that's the thing. If Proposition 6 loses, it's an amazing statement that the public is sick and tired of deteriorated streets and highways in the state of California.
Right, and they were willing to pay a little extra in their gas for better roads, better bridges, better infrastructure.
The complaint is, and the worry is the money really going to go to priorities, or is it going to go to legislators' pet funds? Is it going to be more bikeways rather than freeway improvements, which the majority of the public thinks is a higher priority?
What's wrong with bikeways?
Well, nothing unless you're trying to go between Santa Rosa and San Rafael in the morning, and then you're concerned about U.S. Highway 101.
Right.
And when you point out that the bikeway's on the side of the freeway, they say, that's nice. They want infrastructure fixed that fits them. Smart's a small. I came up tonight. I'm paralleling a smart train. That was nice. But it has to be practical. It has to be usable. Public has to sense that they're getting value for their money. And that's the task of the state in the Proposition 6. And it's the state of Marin County and Proposition AA and the others. Deliver for the people.
Thanks so much, Dick Spotswood, columnist for the Marin Independent Journal.
It's always a pleasure to be right here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, now here in Sonoma County, the sign I saw most often was probably Yes on M, which promised parks for all. And around the Bay and other jurisdictions also asked for money to pay for water projects and parks. In a moment, Caryl Hart joins us. She's the former director of Sonoma County Regional Parks. And in her time as the leader there, Measure J, a sales tax aimed at raising about $100 million for local parks, lost in a squeaker. Let's see what's on the ballot today regarding parks in our region. Welcome, Caryl Hart, to our election night special.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm glad to be here. It's great.
Now, I know that you've just come from down the street from a party that you're hoping will be a yes on Measure M victory celebration. Tell me what the sentiment is there. How are people feeling?
Well, you know, it's hard to know how people are feeling because I'm so uptight. I just radiate uptightness. But I think the feeling is really positive. It's a wonderful party put on by our partners in this, the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, who, you know, have been with us since day one trying to get some funding for absolutely essential funding for parks in this county. So when the numbers came out, the initial numbers at 68.6, 2% above where we need to be at 2/3, with those being the vote by mail ballots, we're feeling pretty good, and we'll see where it goes tonight. But so far, so good. We're excited. I think it shows a recognition by the people in this county of how important and essential our parks are for so many reasons, from the base economic reasons of how important they are to drive tourists and build the tourism economy, to just the other side of it, which is after everything we've been through in this county with the fires, that we need a place for solace and a place to relax and get away from everything that we've been experiencing. So it's a recognition by people in this county of just how important our parks are.
I don't want to bring up an unhappy memory, but I know Measure J, which you were very active for, and that's back when you were leading the parks. That failed by just 1,000 or so votes, as I understand. Why do you think this is going to do so much better than Measure J?
Well, first of all, I mean, that was a unique measure. It was sort of something that we had to bring to the ballot pretty quickly. We didn't have a chance to work with all the cities. There were a lot of other measures that the county was considering at that time. So because we were unable to talk to the cities and work out a formula where the cities would get a certain amount of the money from the measure, it was an unincorporated area only measure, which of course the regional parks are largely in the unincorporated area, so it sort of made sense, at least to me. And I think to a lot of the voters, we did get 65.3%.
Oh my gosh.
I know, we were just short,
6.6.
6.6. Yeah, so so I think that it didn't have so much to do with how people valued parks as a sense on the part of the Press Democrat, which opposed the measure, and on some of the voters that it was unfair for people in the unincorporated area to be for the sales tax only to apply in that area versus countywide. So this time, it's a 1/8 cent tax versus a 1/2% tax, so it's a very small tax. A chunk of the money is going to go to each of the cities based on population, but after all, that's a great thing. City parks are so essential to people's lives. Parks that people can walk to, things like the potential Spring Lake Greenway that would connect downtown Santa Rosa with Spring Lake, and just all the other projects that are proposed in the cities. And then regional parks will still be looking at, $7.5 million potentially per year to help maintain their system, deal with deferred maintenance, and for regional parks to continue to open lands that have been off limits to the public, lands that were bought by the Open Space District over the last 20 years. That are really an exciting opportunity. I think people will be beyond excited if we're able to pass this measure.
Well, that's great. Now, you told me that you were following a couple of other measures and questions and propositions and things tonight as people went to the polls. Tell me about those.
Sure. There's several resource measures. There's State Prop 3, which is a very interesting proposition. It's a water bond, but it has a lot of other resource benefits, but it also has some negatives. Probably the largest negative is that it was not put together by the legislature. It was put together by the author, and it's an initiative. So we can talk about that in a minute. There's Measure FF in the East Bay, which is doing great tonight, I understand, and it should do great because East Bay Regional Parks, like Sonoma Regional Parks, serves people that really need to get outdoors. Those parks provide an absolutely essential function for Contra Costa, Alameda counties. That was not a tax increase, it was a continuation of an existing tax. And their leader, Bob Doyle, one of my closest friends, is a superstar in the parks world. And I'm thrilled that that is looking so good tonight. Then we have Measure T down in San Jose, which is a large infrastructure bond, very large. And part of that, which I think is very interesting, is the opportunity to look at ecosystem services. And the provision in this case of the Coyote Valley, which is an area there's been a lot of focus on preserving. It's between Morgan Hill and San Jose, on protecting that. And a recognition in that measure, which I'm not sure how it's doing, I'll have to check, that the Coyote Valley area provides sort of a flood basin that protects other areas. So it can be protected as open space. It can provide essential recreation value, habitat, biodiversity protection, and flood protection. But so 50 million of that very large, I think it's 650, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact amount,
Sure.
Will go to that. And then a lot of it is going toward roads and other city infrastructure projects. So
Now, as I hear you talk about this, it seems like professionals who can have the, let's call it the 30,000 foot view, really need to put things in place all over our region so that the land is working together and the water is working. And what's the problem with going to the voters each time for each and every little thing, rather than having professionals working on this and making decisions?
do you mean the difference between, you mean having it built into a general fund versus having to go to voters?
Right, yes.
I think it's been a long-standing issue in California. We have a sales tax that's capped at a certain level. We have property taxes, and the reality is you only go so far with those. When it comes to natural resources, and particularly these days with impacts from more and more people living in areas, our regional park system here in Sonoma County is 50 years old and has never gotten specific funding, unlike a lot of the other regions in the Bay Area. And there just really is no way to take care of these properties within the general fund. So whether it's state parks or East Bay or South Bay or here in Sonoma County, we need to have additional funds to build a park system and maintain a park system that serves our users. And it's also so critically important to keep the cost down so that people don't have to pay. Right now we have $7. It was $7 when I arrived at Regional Park in 2010, I believe, or $6, and it's at $7, and the goal is to keep it at no more than $7 to access the parks so that
Right.
everyone can afford it.
Sure. Of course, affordability is key. And
Right.
also, there's been a system put into place. I know when I go to the parks, I hear some people saying that they're volunteers.
Right.
Other people say they're part of a professional group that keeps a park open where the state can't afford to do that anymore. Is that system working for us right now?
Well, I think it only goes so far. I mean, returning for a minute to the tribe,
Please.
let's take the park, Tole Lake Regional Park, that just
Okay.
opened October 27th. So when I was the regional parks director, before a park can be open, you have to have a master plan for a park, and that's a very expensive proposition. You often have neighbors that are concerned about the impacts on their lives of opening a park, and you really have to plan it carefully. And we just simply did not have the money for that, and neither did the county. So in that case, the tribe stepped up, donated $500,000 for the master plan, and we were able to embark on a planning process which ultimately led us to the conclusion that nothing would be better than to co-manage what is a very sacred area with the tribe. And that is going to make it very unique. The only co-managed tribal regional parks property that I know of.
So there's an upside to this,
Absolutely.
you're telling me, that
Yeah.
the tribes get involved, that people who are passionate about parks can go and volunteer.
Absolutely.
That all sorts of ways that people can work on the parks and make them, as it said on the Measure M, parks for all.
Right, and that's always going to be true, but at the end of the day, you have to have funding for a park system, and people want to do that, and we're seeing that tonight, and hopefully it'll continue to grow, and in our perfect world get over 70%, because you know the regional parks have 90% approval rate in this county.
Wow.
People love the parks, and I think that it's just a reality that they need extra funding.
Well, thanks, Caryl Hart, for joining us tonight, and I know
Thank
you have
you
to
so
get
much.
back to the casino and
Yes,
make
I
what you
have to
hope
get
is
back.
a victory speech, so thanks for joining
Yeah,
us.
thank you so much.
All right, back down to the South Bay now. What questions were fought over and what results can we look forward to as the returns come in tonight? Here's Terry Christensen again.
Welcome back. I'm Terry Christensen of CreaTV San Jose, reporting for NorCal Public Media. Besides some intense contests between candidates, voters in Santa Clara County and San Jose and other South Bay cities will make some important fiscal and policy decisions today as they vote on a variety of ballot measures. Santa Clara County Measure A is an extension of a 1/8 cent sales tax. It's not very much money, and it's not a tax increase because it's only extending an existing tax. But while Santa Clara County voters have been generous about approving tax measures in the past few years, including money for transportation and housing, some observers are wondering when they'll say enough. This is a general tax, so it only requires approval by a simple majority of 50% plus one, and it's relatively small, so it's probably going to pass. Meanwhile, the city of San Jose has a couple of minor charter amendments on the ballot and 2 bond measures. Measure T bonds would fund infrastructure, including roads, bridge repair, flood control, and also some protection for Coyote Valley, which is part of San Jose's Greenbelt. Measure V provides bond funding to address a major current crisis in San Jose, and actually the whole Bay Area. That's affordable housing. San Jose hasn't asked voters to approve bonds since 2000, so the city lags far behind on funding for infrastructure and housing. But bonds require approval of 2/3 of the voters, and that's tough. Again, these measures will be a test of the continued willingness of South Bay voters to tax themselves. Elsewhere, the city of Mountain View, the headquarters of Google, will vote on a head tax on employees ranging from $8 to $149 per worker, depending on the size of the business. This would be a way to generate funds for city services that are impacted by big companies like Google or Apple, and other South Bay cities are watching and considering similar measures. But they're also conscious that taxes like this could drive employers away. Voters in the city of Santa Clara, the home of the 49ers, will be electing their council by district for the first time. This is due to a court order. Several other Bay Area cities have also recently switched to district elections under threat of lawsuits made possible by the California Voting Rights Act of 2002. Traditionally, most cities have selected council members in at-large or citywide elections. Critics have argued that this system makes it difficult or impossible for minority candidates to win elections. And under the California Voting Rights Act, cities can be challenged in court to prove this is not the case, and many have chosen to switch to districts rather than face an expensive court fight that they'd probably lose. And it's true, by the way, that minority candidates as well as women have been more successful where councils are elected by district rather than at large. That's certainly been the case for San Jose, which changed to district elections in 1980. But while Santa Clara is electing council members by district for the first time today, leaders of the city are still resisting the change. They've appealed the court order mandating district elections and put Measure N on the ballot for an advisory vote by the citizens on whether to start a new public process on representation by district. It looks like Santa Clara politics will be in turmoil for quite a while. Other cities, including Santa Rosa in Sonoma County and Sunnyvale in Santa Clara County, are currently considering whether to make the switch to district elections or go to court. And that's my report on South Bay ballot measures. If you'd like to know more about what's going on in South Bay politics, find CreaTV San Jose on YouTube and check out our show, Valley Politics.
As we close, we're going to talk about 2 major housing initiatives, one statewide and one local here in Santa Rosa. Proposition 10, opposed overwhelmingly by the state's business establishment and news outlets like the San Francisco Chronicle and the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat, would repeal a bill that prohibits localities from making certain decisions about rent control. This hasn't been the most expensive question on the ballot. That distinction goes to Proposition 8, the dialysis question. But Proposition 10 comes in at number 2 with over $100 million spent, opponents outspending advocates by about 3 to 1. Beatrice Camacho is an advocate for local renters who works for the North Bay Organizing Project. Welcome, Beatrice.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. Now, before we go to Proposition 10, I'd like to talk about Measure N in Santa Rosa And I'll let folks in on the secret that we talked earlier, and you said you were weighing the different arguments for and against. So I won't ask you how you voted, because I don't want to know. But you'd be the perfect person to give me some of those arguments. Who are the people who were for it? What did they say? And what were the arguments against?
Yes, so currently remaining neutral on Measure N. We know that there is a dire need for more housing in Santa Rosa and a need for more affordable housing. And we understand that. And we have, as an organization, we have strong ties to both sides for it and against it. And in terms of the opposition, we also know that we want to support our local labor organizing, and we want to ensure that there are measures, safety regulations that are being met. And there's been some, miscommunication around what those are specifically. And so we're hoping that something does happen moving forward.
Were apprenticeships also an issue that the unions said we want
a
people?
A certain percentage,
right?
Yes, and then in terms of the pay for it. And a lot of the conversation has been once it passes and after the fact, then the conversation will be had in terms of the specifics around it.
So there wasn't a lot of trust there, apparently, between the opponents and the proponents.
Right. A big part of it is the trust factor, definitely.
All right. Let's talk now a little bit about Proposition 10.
Yes.
And, I couldn't escape turning on the TV other than the darn dialysis ads every minute. The other minutes were taken up by no on Proposition 10.
Yes.
People did not want, or the business community funded to the tune of $75 million this attack on Proposition 10. What does $75 million buy in our elections these days?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it was near $100 million that we were seeing all of these commercials coming up saying that Prop 10 would increase rents. As I was doing phone banking, a lot of folks that I was talking with were very confused in terms of whether it was a good thing or a bad thing because of what they had seen. So we saw a lot of the real estate industry really putting in a lot of money to confuse people. A lot of our Spanish-speaking folks, too, were really confused.
Was there advertising in Spanish that I might not have seen or heard?
There was, yes. There was advertisement in Spanish. Again, the misconception of if this happens, there will be less housing built, rent will be increased, and so there was a lot of work that had to be done to ensure that folks understood what it really meant.
Right. Now, one of the first the sentences that I read against Proposition 10, every sentence started, economists agree that this is a bad idea. Now, as a renter's advocate, what is your answer to that?
There are studies that show that cities that do actually have rent control are actually doing fairly well. If folks are able to pay, their salary where it's not more than 50% to rent, then they have more money that they're able to put back into the economy. A lot of these cities with rent control are also increasing in terms of housing production. So there are studies out there that show the opposite of that.
Right. Well, what is your next move for your organization and for the kind of folks in town who believe that there's nothing more important than rent control for people to be protected?
Right. Well, regardless of what happens with Proposition 10, there's a big movement all across the state, all across the nation. We're a state of about 17 million renters, and we have about 463 cities in this state, regardless of whether it passes or not, that could get rent control, essentially. So really working on tenant protections. Myself and some other leaders in our community with Legal Aid of Sonoma County, SEIU 1021, are working on...
You say that very fast. That's
sorry.
a union, SEIU.
Yes. We are working on building a countywide tenants union. So to ensure that as renters, as tenants, that we're able to have protections, that we're able to say in our cities, in our county, that, I'm born and raised in Santa Rosa, have lived there my entire life, and just have seen the changes throughout the years and folks moving out constantly because of their inability to afford it.
Right. Where do they go? Especially the Latino community, when they are priced out of Sonoma County and are working here perhaps still, what's their next move? How far out can they go and how can they get to their jobs?
We see a lot of people moving out of state, right? People that aren't able to come back. We see them going to Texas, to Idaho, going up north, to Oregon and Washington. moving away from the area that they've called home for so long. So we want to ensure that we're able to understand, how do we have these protections for our folks? And then also, in addition, we're doing tenants' rights clinics. What kind of protections do we have as renters? Even if they're minimal, at least we're educated and we know.
Well, to give me the top line, what do you go in? It's the morning, you're doing a tenants' rights clinic. What are some of the rights that tenants have?
Oh, well, they're very minimal,
Really?
to be honest.
Oh.
I mean, we actually don't really have many, A landlord can evict you because they don't like the color of your hair.
No.
Yes, so there are actually very minimal rights that we do have as tenants, but we're ensuring that folks have that knowledge.
Okay, I also wanted to talk to you about elections by district in Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
This is the first time there's a lawyer who apparently is able to move lots of municipalities, including ones in the South Bay that we've just heard about, and here in Santa Rosa was able to make the city council go to elections for city council by district. And yet it seemed like in bringing in Roseland into Santa Rosa, this would have been a great time for Roseland to be able to elect a city council person. But did that happen in this election?
Well, no. So come 2020 will be, Roseland's opportunity to elect a city council member. And, it's great that it's happening. Prior to 2012, in the city of Santa Rosa, the majority, about 83% or so, of city council members were coming from the east side of Santa Rosa. So,
and even the northeast side, I've heard the mayor say that number of city council members were always from the northeast.
Right, right. And so this is a great opportunity to have folks from the areas be represented. And so come 2020, it'll be very exciting to see the outcome of it, and for all the other districts too in the city of Santa Rosa.
All right. Now, is there a lot of work today in the Latino community in terms of building capacity, in terms of building leadership? Because that seems like probably a very important thing for the Latino community to be able to do.
There is, there's
Tell me
an
about some of those
appetite.
things.
There's an appetite,
Yeah.
right, to get out there and to get involved and politically involved. As an organization, we work with our community to train, to empower, to, folks know what it is that they need, right? They just need to have the platform to be able to vocalize it. And oftentimes our voices get suppressed. And so to be in a community with people who are experiencing these impacts and be able to see that the other person sitting next to you feels the same thing and the empowerment that happens. So organizing is what we're doing, going around to our community and listening to them and figuring out what's going on and what is that you need and how do we come together to create a change that's very much needed for us.
Okay, today was a very different kind of day, obviously Election Day.
Yes.
We're all going to take a deep breath and go about our lives tomorrow. Tell me, what do you do when you go into work tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning, let's see, I have back-to-back meetings scheduled.
Okay.
Going into talking about what do we do next for our county in terms of housing. My very first meeting is talking about housing and how are we going to address the immediate need. As I said earlier, we're very much in support of production, right? But there are things that are happening right now where we have renters who are experiencing, rent increases that they cannot meet.
Right, there's illegal rent increases, aren't there? I was told that because of the fire there was a 10% cap on rents, and I was also told at the same time that rents in the last year have gone up 50 to 60%. How can both of those things be true?
So right after the fires happened, there was a lot of price gouging that occurred. And then when the governor put in the 10%, which expires December 4th, folks were increasing to that 10%.
Right.
And when we have a lot of individuals, especially our seniors who are on fixed income, folks who are of low income that can't make ends meet, that 10% is difficult and it's a lot. So we are going to continue going into how do we protect our renters and our tenants? What kind of policies can we have push our city council to pass in order for that to happen as well? Whether it's extending that 10% rent cap, or some other type of.
Well, Beatrice Camacho of the North Bay Organizing Project, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay, we hope you've enjoyed this hour and that we've all learned something together. If you're unhappy with the outcomes tonight and you didn't vote, promise yourself that you will vote in 2020. And if you'd like to see more live local news on KRCB and KPJK, write to us at news@norcalpublicmedia.org. Follow us on Facebook, and please subscribe to our new podcast. It's called Living Downstream, the Environmental Justice Podcast. We tell stories from all over California, the United States, and even the world. We go as far as Indonesia to tell stories about environmental justice. Now, that's all for tonight. For all of us here at Northern California Public Media, I'm Steve Mencher, and I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. You had a lot of choices, and I'm glad you decided to join us here in the studio. Thanks. Bye-bye.
NHK World Japan brings Japan to the world. Our service is available to 300 million households worldwide, offering you the latest news every hour on the hour. Experience all the charms of Japan. Widen your horizons. NHK World Japan.